Hello,
Hello.
Dennis. Nice to see you again.
Hello. Yeah, it has been a while, I think, almost 2 years now.
Yeah, it's 1.5 years since we met in
Yeah.
Vienna during the drum technique workshop. So yeah, how's it going in Austria now?
Things fine. I mean, considering the current situation, I think we're all hanging in tight together, so cannot blame anyone and anything. Just trying to make my way through and have a good time. That's all I
Yeah,
can say. So besides that, it's quite cool.
nice. All right, so basically I got this idea. I was thinking about, what do I want to learn about, drumming and hardware and pedals and all that. And I was kind of thinking that I think maybe me and well, myself and other people have some like misconceptions about drum pedals. And I got this, I think I started thinking about these things after the drum technique workshop. And basically, yeah, like such things like, why belt drives feel like more natural, and all these kind of nerdy things. And basically my idea was that maybe you're gonna help me maybe debunk.
Basically, you started,
Yeah,
you started taking a closer look at your pedals and questioning some things around it.
yeah, basically. And I thought that maybe, we can educate some more people on the way.
Right, I do my best because I'm a terrible musician, but at least I think I know what's going on with pedals sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
All right.
I don't know. Do you have? I still have the questions you sent me or the general topics in front of me. Do you want to go? I don't know, over them, or do you have any other schedule or whatever? So
yeah, I think maybe let's first, introduce. Just yeah, just tell people who you are. And
yeah, you know me. I don't need to
yeah.
introduce me to you. But for those who don't know me, I'm Dennis Namesnik. Some people on the internet probably know me as the guy behind ACD Unlimited. I started, modifying pedals, building drum stuff almost a decade ago now. And yeah, first making drums, drums in general, say staff shares, whole drum sets, snare drums. And I don't know, accidentally everything went towards hardware exactly, or to be more direct more closely to drum pedals, because people I need to move around a little bit. So I used to play drums, 10 to 15 years ago. I tried to do it. I'm a terrible musician, but somehow I stayed connected with the whole music scene and friends who play drums way better than I do. And so I basically, was always interested in the technical aspect behind it. So when I started building drums, I was very cautious about making everything right, doing my research and that stuff. And basically, after I started building more drums, people became aware that I have a background in mechanical engineering. So I used to do lots of CAD drawing and CNC machining back in the company I did my apprenticeship back then. So when I was in the middle of figuring out how to make drums and selling them and that stuff, people asked me, hey, I have a broken footboard, I have a broken Driveshaft. Is there anything you can do about that? And so on and so forth. So basically everything started by taking my old pedals out of the garage, out of the basement, taking a closer look and going, all right, basically it is what it is. It's not terrible. I mean, my stuff back then was super old, but there are just some minor details, minor things that could be improved or probably could be done better. And then I started to modifying my own pedals and started modifying pedals for other people around me, and just learned my lessons on the way, let's say, and then just learned about the differences and also what's important about the pedal and what is responsible for what outcome in terms of feeling, especially. And after a few years doing that, back when I did my apprenticeship, I started machining my own drum pedal, because back then left-handed high quality pedals wasn't really a thing, especially in Central Europe. So then grabbed a few years ago, I grabbed my old prototype and thought, maybe it's time to take what I've learned by modifying other pedals and break it down into my own construction and try to develop my own pedal. And this is how the whole Darwin drum pedal series has started, and all other modifications and updates based on that. So it wasn't planned at all, it happened by accident, let's say, but I consider myself pretty lucky to how everything turned out, because bottom line, it's quite fun. I enjoy what I'm doing, and that's at least what I care about. And it looks like that customers, people, friends around me also appreciate what I'm doing. And yeah, that's all I can say about probably me and what I'm doing. I hope that makes any sense.
Yeah. And the Darwins, they look amazing and they feel amazing. Eventually I'm gonna get one. I know that for sure.
Just you know where to find it.
Yeah, true. All right. So yeah, I sent you some questions to think about, and yeah, the first one was, do you think that there are some beginner mistakes that mostly all people make while setting up their pedals?
I can only speak for myself. When I started drumming, I mean, I was into that whole journey, I think 2 to 3 years, and then I slowly stopped, and I'm just drumming from time to time. But the mistake I made, or what I assumed, is that if I want to accomplish a certain level of drumming, I need high quality gear. And that's certainly not true, or not high quality gear, but I need a certain piece of equipment. Back then, I spent lots of time in internet communities, forums, and that stuff. And it was basically the case between the lines. If you want to go fast, you need a direct drive pedal. Back then, there was only Axis, later Demon drives. So I always assumed, okay, I'm not fast, but the reason why I'm not fast is because I don't have this certain type of pedal. And later on the way, I learned, and also especially by knowing more and more people who play all various types of pedals. I mean, back if you consider the old school guys like Vinnie Paul, or some other people who play old crappy shitty pedals, stumping about them and still being accurate and more or less okay with what they have and enjoy what they have, then I thought, okay, maybe it's not about what piece of equipment I use properly, is how much time I spend with this piece of equipment, getting noticed this certain type, getting know how it feels, how it reacts, how I need to react in order to achieve a certain thing. So my beliefs are that it's not like that you can accomplish everything with any pedal or with any piece of hardware. Certainly high quality gear, especially if it's well made and a certain price point, will give you some relief and some quality. It not makes it easier, but probably it makes it more relaxed, and also it makes it more reliable over a longer time. Because if you have a 40-year-old pedal you probably like, there are some parts that will wear down, bearings, chains whatsoever. So yeah, what I've learned is the most time you spend with your equipment and getting to know your equipment, you will also know how to adjust it in a way that you feel okay with that. Because when I started developing the pedal and looking for feedback, I thought that based on what I have assumed back then, that every guy who wants to go in a faster playing direction, in terms of the double kicks or whatever, will prefer a certain type of pedals. But on the way, I learned that everyone has completely different preferences when it comes to settings. And I'm still learning on my way now with every new customer, every person who's reaching out to me with some feedback, playing Darwin's or any other piece of equipment upgrade. And that's super interesting. So yeah, the only misconception I can say is don't assume that high quality or expensive gear will get you take any quick corners, because that's unfortunately not the case.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, like, you don't need an expensive pedal to be flying, right? On the kit, like you can, and I think there is a line, actually. I do think that, those cheap one chain pedals don't really make life easier. I mean, yeah, I guess, take any brand, doesn't matter, but basically I would say stay out of the league of like those, 70 euro pedals.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
Point, yeah.
yeah, but basically, yeah, because it's just gonna break down and get wobbly.
I mean, I'm still talking when I talk about cheap or cheaper equipment. I'm still talking properly in the somewhere at the midway entry level stuff where we actually can talk about musical equipment and not toys or crappy Chinese products or pay through Walmart or stuff like that. So I think that within depends on the brand, because don't forget that probably you will get the same quality or the same. If you're looking for an entry level pedal, you considerably will get an equal quality at a pedal that's probably sold only through the store's brand, basically, so their own brand, because you also pay, especially with larger brands, if you buy an entry-level pedal, you pay for marketing expensive, branding expensive, retailers, everything around that. So everyone wants their share and pay on top of that. So especially if you're looking for a good deal, look around at these bigger music stores who have their own brands developed, because what they're doing is they cut corners, get their stuff from the OEM machinery, mostly in China, put their name tag on it and sell it directly. So they cut all these retailers and all the other usual expensive in order to get their own brand out for an affordable and very competitive price. So that's another thing, probably in terms of misconception. I mean, I'm not that let's say I'm neutral, because I'm obviously running my own business as well. But I'm also questioning and criticizing lots going on around the market. I think.
Yeah. But I do think that, like, you don't need, well, just to finish off this topic, but I think that you don't need expensive gear, but like really good quality gear does help. Certain things become actually easier, but it's not impossible to do with a mid-level pedal.
But I had another example that really kept me questioning some things. Was that I had a customer who had a 25-year-old Axis pedal, pretty much worn down, played it every single day for the last a decade or two, and he ordered the Driveshaft from me because he heard about that thing will do a good job and will keep everything running smooth. And actually, he returned it and complained about it, that it's too smooth. So basically, I assume he got used to the difference between the left and the right foot, and he has taken advantage over the lag when he's stepping onto the pedal and having the lag through the Driveshaft, because he got used to that so much. And then from one step to another, you go from 0 to 100 in terms of lag to no lag, and he completely, I don't know, it was an overwhelming feeling. It felt so different that he said, no, that can't be the case. I'm not able to play my pedal just because there isn't any play anymore. And that was, I mean, for me, it was hard to believe, but I said, okay, he got used to it. It's acceptable, return it, go ahead, whatever makes sense for you, it's fine. And it was entertaining to say.
Yeah, dude, that's so interesting that people get used to like the quirks of their hardware, like basically the lagging. You get used to the lagging of the left pedal and you can't really play with a good pedal with zero lag. So interesting. All right, let's dive into the parts of the pedals. And the Footboard, the thing you step on. So basically, there are nowadays we have two main boards, right? We have a short board and we have a long board. Can you just tell me and other people like how does the footboard affect the feel of the pedal?
So the big problem I faced in trying to explain paper what's the difference between a long board and a short board is that there are no standards for such names. So basically, I think the name longboard was developed when Axis threw out the Axis longboards. Then Trig picked it up with the Bigfoot and so on and so forth. But they all vary in length. So it's interesting to see because I take I make the line between a pedal having a heel plate and having no heel plate. But especially taking or comparing an Iron Cobra and Speed Cobra, both footboards look more or less the same, having a footboard and a separate heel plate. But if you take the length of the Speed Cobra, of the moving part of the Speed Cobra, and compare it to an Axis longboard or to a Trig Bigfoot or even to my pedal, it's more or less the same length. So it's more a longboard than a shortboard, but in my consideration, it's still a shortboard just because it has this heel part. So I think it's always a good thing to be able to at least take some calipers, take a tape measure or whatever, and compare the actual length of the moving parts if you have the opportunity to do so. But basically, what changed between the footboard length is not only the space you have available in order to find a certain sweet spot. So what I have experienced is that people appreciate just the larger surface of a longboard pedal because depending on certain playing techniques and certain speeds, they can move along the pedal back and forward and find a different sweet spot for every different tempo they play. But besides that, it only changes really the leverages between where is the pivoting point in the back and where is the motion coming from. So the longer this area is, or the further back this pivot point is, the more lightweight feeling the pedal will become because you're acting on a completely different leverage. So basically with the Darwins, I have, for example, the longboard option like this one and the shortboard option, which connects around this part over here. I don't know if you can see the cutout. And this is about, let's say, 2 inches on metric, 50 millimeters shorter than the longboard. And the whole pedal feels the same, but it feels like it feels heavier in the same way. So basically, if you let all the settings of the pedal the same and just switch from a longboard to a shortboard, you can compare it to shifting up a gear on the bicycle, basically, because that's the easiest explanation I have figured out to make it visible what's going on and just change the footboard length. So a shorter footboard will lead to a heavier feeling. Not heavier in terms of spring tension, but heavier in terms of friction in some certain certain type of friction, let's say. That's the thing. So at the moment, when I compare it with the orders I'm getting in, most people prefer the longboard, but I also need to say that just a very few people have tried out both versions and have made their decision based on having tried both versions. Basically, I say if someone is uncertain, they should go with the longboard. If it feels too lightweight, then I know, okay, they would probably need or would take advantage of a shortboard. So, but I also have guys from various types of music who play a shortboard or have ordered a shortboard right away because they say they don't want to have this large area. They are used to having a dedicated part where they can step on that's resting, that's not moving at all. Because if you don't change your foot position and you got used to having a resting spot here, stomping even down here will get your pedal moving if you want it or not. So it's all coming down to personal preferences once again. But yeah, to round it up, shorter footboard, heavier feeling, longer footboard, lighter feeling.
Yeah, but basically, like for most people, it's not really about the feel. I think this is just my opinion, but I think it's more about how much space you have and how many different positions you have on the pedal. because I think, well, it's personally, I like a short board. I don't know why. I like having less options. Just, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you could know your stuff. You know when you step on the pedal at a certain area. Of course, I mean, if you're having a larger area, also the room for an incorrect placement is larger, because if you only have this space to place your foot, there is not that much room to place your foot that far off that it will lead to a different feeling. But if you have this space, you know what's going on. That's definitely another thing. I also heard people frequently reaching out to me and asking how long the footboard is, because they want to be able to place their whole foot on the footboard, even if they're not playing heel down, if they play heel up. And then I try to explain the thing with the leverage, just because there's certainly, in my opinion, no reason that you need to be able to place your whole foot onto the footboard, because if you place it on the foot, you have a different place of impact when you play certain things. And also, if you want to play heel down, you will still have to weigh all the way down to a dedicated heel part, or to a resting spot on the floor, and considering the Darwins, or basically your heel will just fall over a little bit. But basically, in my opinion, there's no need to be able to place the whole foot on a footboard just to be able to have it feel the correct way.
Yeah. And I've heard people say that they like longboards because they have big feet. And I don't know if this is actually true, that people that it makes people with big feet, it makes it easier for them if they have like a longboard. I have no idea.
Also some people, I mean, if you compare the footboard riff, for example, of my pedal, of Tricks and Axis, and I'm terrible with pronouncing names, the CKs, the Polish ones, then you will also see that, for example, Trick is quite narrow from top to bottom. People like to have the same riff all over the place. So I had also the opportunity to make some custom footboards similar to these Tricks in terms of riff. Axis has a weird shape. People say, okay, where the zigzag is, there's the sweet spot, so they know what's going on. And CKs, for example, have a rather short footboard, so it's about half an inch, 1.5 centimeters shorter than my pedal, but it's almost twice as wide. And then
yeah, it's a big one.
Who tend to swivel, or just have some pivoting motion during playing, who really enjoy to have the opportunity to place their foot wherever they want sideways, while others who have a similar technique like to have a dedicated edge to feel when they go too far out. So the guy who asked me to make the narrow pedal said he's having this motion, but he wants to know when he goes too far, because that will influence some other things. So that's also super interesting in terms of how, just how the football is shaped. It's a whole story you can probably write half a book about.
Yeah, and I think it's a great idea that you know, all these pedals now have. It's not the length of the board, but it's actually in the width, you know, of it, because you have more space to do these kind of crazy swivels, or you know, if you watch people like Rim, right, play, like his foot is like always moving all the time. Yeah, and it's and kind of kind of, if you have more space on the footboard, makes it a bit easier, I think. And even if it feels a bit safer, because you know you have some space and you're not gonna fly off the pedal. Your foot is not gonna, you know, go away. All right. Next thing, and this is I would say the most controversial one of all the bunch. Spring tension. All right, because you kind of blew my mind a bit back in 2019, because I think, yeah, you told me that, you know, because I was trying to find the perfect settings for because I was then just starting to relearn basically the ankle motion, and I was looking for the kind of perfect settings for that. And it was you that told me that, you know, you should just loosen the spring, but, you know, push the beater back because it'll feel more natural. And you were right. And it kind of blew my mind. So just, can you tell us a bit about how the spring tension affects the feel of the pedal and what it does?
Yeah, so the thing is that not only the spring tension, or as I like to say, the set position of the spring has influence in how the pedal feels. It's a relationship with any other adjustment you have. It's oh, thank the doorbell. Well, whatever. But the thing is that oh, sorry. The bell ring and I'm completely off. No, the thing is that it's a relationship with any other settings around there on the pedal. So your footboard height has an influence, especially your beat angle has an influence, but it also breaks down to the type of spring you are using, the length of the spring, also the distance between the center of rotation down to the top pivoting point of the spring. So if you want to go back to misconceptions, what I have done and what I see other people doing when they try to go fast in the very early stage is crank down the springs to max tension and get the beater close to the drum head as possible, because my assumption back then was the closer I am, the faster I am at the drum head and the faster will I be able to play. But the problem I had was that I have maxed out my springs and not even had the tension I was looking for in order to get the feedback I was looking for. So what I did back then was I kept the spring type. Oh no, yeah, I kept the spring type. And I basically did what I tried to, or what I explained to you. I lowered the spring tension a little bit, and I just tried to move the beater back, because I thought, if I press deeper into the pedal, the pre-tension on the spring will also increase, and maybe this will give me the feedback I'm looking for. And this was, for me, one step in the right direction. And years later, I experienced more, especially when I did the construction about the Darwin pedals. I experienced lots with different springs, and especially with the distance of the pivoting motion, because this motion or this distance is probably has a similar effect to increasing the beta angle. By increasing this distance, you will get more spring tension out of the spring over a certain rotation. So basically, if you have a distance like this and you pivot it, it stretches the spring more than just having a distance like this and pivot it. So, and you can get over the same beta angle, you can get probably twice, or at least 25% to 50-75% more spring tension just by messing around with this setting. So obviously there's a too far position as well, so I kept it more comfortable. And also the spring length has a huge influence, because you can take, I think the average Iron Cobra spring is a little bit shorter but thinner than the regular Pearl Eliminator spring, which is a little longer but thicker, and both will have the same outcome in terms of actual spring tension, because a longer spring gets stretched less of their own length over the same stretching distance, whatever you like to call. So you will stress a shorter spring more than a longer spring, and that results in an even spring tension at the max position. So I hope that makes any sense. So what I did, I also have a tendency to have the spring more or less on the shorter side. So I'm offering two different, I'm sorry, that was the compressor. But basically I'm offering two different types of springs, both have the same length, and just the thickness of the wire is different, both are more on the shorter side, which gives me the opportunity to play a rather less and rather sloppy basic spring tension. So the pedal is very easy to push in from the very beginning, But over the time, depending on how far back my beta angle is, I will get all the feedback, all the tension I'm looking for. And the cool thing is, because you have an easy start and the spring tension rapidly increases exponentially over the beta rotation, you don't feel it as much as if you would have a very, very tight setting from the very beginning, because your foot is already in the motion, the beta is already in the motion, and all of that contributes to work against the feedback and the final spring tension you're looking for, basically. So that's what I have experienced. And then the interesting point is, if you have a setting like this, or if you have a tighter spring on a looser setting, and you just mess around with the beta angle a tiny little bit, just a few degrees back and forward, you will see such a difference just by moving around it a little bit. It's hard to believe if you haven't tried it. So my basic my 2 cents, if you want to ask for that, is keep the spring at the more or less average tension, where it makes sense, where you don't overstress the spring, because that's another point. If you go all the way down and if you step in all the way, then you will break the spring easier, because break it down, it is a rare part and it will wear over time, and there's a point where it's going to break. And by overstressing a spring, you will break it sooner than later. But so keep the spring tension at an average level, not completely maxed out, and rather increase the beta angle, or the distance between the drum head and the beta, in order to get more feedback and faster responding pedal, because that's what most people are looking for. If they press into the pedal and if they go up again, they don't want to have the pedal rest and then clonk, touch the foot again. They want to have the pedal move with your foot motion in order to easier control the pedal, which also then makes it easier to play within certain tempos. So you can speed up, speed down easier just by having the control and the responsibility of the pedal. But there's no need to have a direct drive pedal, because you can assume that the direct connection will lead to higher responsibility or reaction of the pedal. But that's certainly not the case. It's all about how you set the beta angle, how you set spring tension, your footboard, and also where you place your foot on the pedal and how you press into the pedal. Because if you press in with your whole foot, it will take you longer to go up again. It's just split seconds. But then you probably will be okay with having a less beta angle. But if you play all angle motion, the motion is pretty quick and quite narrow. So you want to have a rather faster increasing or reacting pedal. By especially just considering playing the same tempos with different techniques, you will look for different settings. So people who play 200 ppm, I don't know, 16ths with their whole foot will be okay with a sloppier, slower pedal. That's back going to Vinnie Paul and all these old guys. When they played the stuff, they played with their whole motion, so they were okay with sloppy, with a slower pedal. But if you rely on tiny motion, accuracy, and efficiency, so for example, Martin really likes to play as efficient as possible. So he had to go to not be able to, he didn't want to sweat when being on stage. So he set everything to be as efficient as possible. He has super tiny motions, has a super, not a heavy setup, but a super extreme setup. So especially he needs to control with tiny movements. He wants to control larger movements on the pedal. And he only can do that by having a very, very responsive and accurate setup pedal. So he wouldn't be able to do the same motion and same technique and same efficiency on a less advanced setup pedal, or probably also on a less high quality pedal. That's back to where I said, especially it makes easier, it makes it more convenient to play with high quality equipment. But over the time, it helps you to find your way, but it's not a must.
Yeah, but it does open some doors, definitely does. Yeah. So yeah, basically you were already blowing my mind here. I wish like I wish somebody would have said this like when I was 15 and starting to play drums, and and somebody would have walked in the room and said, dude, just don't don't max out your springs. It's it's not that.
Everyone has done it.
It's not gonna make you faster. It's actually gonna slow you down in the progress. But yeah, and you were talking about different springs, and this just popped into my head, this question that, well, does it make sense to change springs over time? Like if they don't break, all right, but just to, you know, kind of like changing oil in a car, right? Does it make sense to change springs?
It depends a little bit, in my opinion, on your actual settings, because when I used to go back to a less tighter pedal, so when I decrease spring tension on my own cobras, I have still the very same springs installed on the pedal. I mean, it's resting more or less all day long, but they haven't worn down. They still feel more or less the same. So that's the thing where I told you with overstressing springs, because if you're working in a certain parameters, you won't overstress the springs. My experience is that if you're using a tighter spring setup, basic tension, and also tighter springs, they have an increased tendency to let go over time. So if you're running a tight setup, it definitely makes sense to change springs once in a while, talking about every 1 or every 2 years, because I talked to Alex Rudinger recently, and he said, because we're experimenting lots with different springs for his very specific setting, and he said that he was using some pearl springs, I think some eliminator springs, for 5 or 6 months, and he has a super tight setup, and he plays super heavy, super powerful, and he just switched the springs to the very same spring, and he said he felt the difference. But the interesting thing was that then the pedal felt heavier again.
The exact same model of pearl springs, right? Yeah. Just the ones he was playing, they were already played. Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely a relief going on over time, having a tight setup and having tighter springs, especially compared to having a less tight setup and thinner springs, because you're not stressing these so much. The question is, do you get used to this decrease of tension over time, or will you rely on this max tension, and then you will need to swap out the springs? Because the interesting conclusion with Rudy was that he got used to the springs getting sloppier, and it was totally fine until the point where he switched them out, because he thought, oh, he can switch them out just to be sure, and then they were too tight again. So it's a question of if you really feel it and if you need it. That comes back to every individual, I assume.
Yeah.
So
nice. It's interesting.
And also just switching springs and experimenting with springs. I've also, I think with your pedal, we just switched the springs, did we? Between the regular one and one of my back then, the heavy version, which has more or less the same wire diameter, but is a bit shorter, in order to increase the responsibility of the pedal. So if you're looking for a different set of springs, I rather would advise to go for a slightly heavier set, but have it at less tension in combination with a larger beta anchor. This is if you're looking for an average setup where everybody can go along until a certain point, this is what makes the most sense in my opinion, and just considering my experience with the feedback I got.
Yeah, dude, this is super interesting. Because I've never thought much about springs, you know, as a variable on the pedal.
I mean, the problem I have is I spend most of my days thinking about that stuff. So in my mind, that's all normal or natural. So if I go too far with a certain topic, please let me stop and interrupt.
All right. So basically, you can to sum it up, right? So basically, you can have either longer springs or shorter, and you can have them, you know, thicker and thinner. That's basically,
Mhm.
that's it,
That's
right?
basically,
Yeah, and also material, does it really matter, or?
I would prefer, I mean, if you have the possibility to dive into actual spring manufacturers and talk to them, I would prefer all steel grade and steel grade springs over stainless steel. I mean, you will need to take care of them, especially if you play in a high humidity area, because they will get some surface oxidation, some so-called rust over time, but they will last way longer and they are also more durable compared to stainless steel springs, which have a tendency to break, especially if you just take some regular types of spring. They will break exactly around here, where they have this corner and this bend over here. There's the point where they will wear down and break super fast. That's what I've experienced. If you are able to get some different springs and the steel grade, and just keeping them lubricated by a thin layer of oil once in a while will completely eliminate all oxidation in the future. And yeah, so you will be on the safe side. That's what I have learned. So I get these springs manufactured. The springs I'm using for the Darwins at a spring company in Vienna, and they just do a spray coating, a thin layer of oil over the springs before they pack them up, and that's how they keep them rust proof. Exactly. So if they feel a little bit greasy, don't clean them. That's meant to be that way, and that's absolutely okay. So,
Okay,
but besides
cool.
that, if you shop at the local music store, just grab a few different springs if you're able to afford it, and just compare them side by side, lay them together, compare the length, compare the wire thickness, snap them onto the pedal, and also see what's the difference between the pedals or between the different springs, because that's how you get known your pedal. Experimenting with different setups, different beta angles, different spring tension, and observe what changes, and then you will exactly know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk beaters. This is also, I think, this is one of the, things that massively changes the feel of the pedal, for me at least. It's like, yeah, the angle, the distance, the weight of the beater. Yeah. What can you say about the feel?
There are a few parameters who have an influence in the total feeling of the pedal. So obviously the surface between wood, plastic, felt, it's just how it sounds. Usually it hasn't any influence on the actual feeling. But what has an influence is the static weight of the beta. So if you put it on a scale, usually it's between 70 and 100 grams, has a huge influence, but also how far out the beta is from your pedal, how far it sticks out. If it on 22-inch kick drum if it hits center, or if it hits slightly above, it totally feels different. And the last parameter that has rather worth mentioning influence is the distance between the beta shaft and the actual surface contact to the drum head. Because if we start with that, it's a huge difference if the pedal hits your drum head here, or if the beta needs to over-rotate in order to hit the drum head. Because at this point, you're at the very highest point your pedal can accomplish. And if you overcome this point, you will lose efficiency, not in terms of responsibility of the pedal, but you will lose power because of the decreasing leverage once again. So this has an interesting influence by just, in the Darwin, you can just move around the hoop clamp and just experiment with this, because I also had customer getting used to the over rotation and they do it consciously and on purpose. But usually that leads to a loss of efficiency. So try to have the beta shaft as parallel to the drum head as possible for first, just on or twice. In terms of the static weight of the beta and how far the beta out is, both have a very, very similar influence on the beta. So you can play a heavier beta, but have it further in, and you will have 90% to 95% a similar feeling to having a lighter beta all the way out. the question here is also the output of power is a little bit different. So the further out the beta is, the more natural power you have just by the throwing motion of the beta. But besides that, the static rate is has less influence than actually where you have the beta positioned. You can also experiment additionally having a certain type of beta and just experimenting with some beta rates. And obviously it really matters where the beta rate is placed. It has a very, very different influence if it's placed here or if it's placed here or in the middle or whatever you want. So that's interesting. And what you also need to take into consideration if you're looking for a certain level of responsibility of your pedal, the heavier the beta is, the more spring tension you will need to compensate the heavy movement of the beta. So having a heavy beta and want to have it pivoting same fast as having a light beta and a medium spring setting will need to have a very, very tight spring setting. And that's breaking down. It's probably also interestingly it comes down to what your preferences are and what you get used to, especially in combination with what playing technique you're preferring, because it's in the same level again. Having preferences for playing your pedals out with the full legs will lead to a preference of a heavier beta, to a shorter footboard, to a tighter spring tension. That's the natural output I have experienced considering that. But there are also some extreme settings. For example, I'm going back to Martin from the Drum Technique Academy. On his main pedal, he uses a very heavy beta with a very heavy additional weight on top in combination with a super, super heavy spring. So if you press down the pedal, it's super heavy to play all the way through. But this is exactly what he needs, a pedal which basically is dead. And he only can control it with the motion of his foot. So he doesn't rely on the feedback of the pedal. He just forces the pedal to play what he feels right in certain tempos. You can see, I'm just assuming here, a similar background theory when you watch videos from Grim, because he plays so powerful, and when he speeds up the pedal and goes slow again, he does it by forcing the pedal to follow his motion. And that's super interesting, and that's has also a tendency to having a heavier beta and a heavier spring setting overall. So I have two extremes on when I get feedback from customers. Most of them prefer a lighter beta and less spring tension in combination with a larger beta angle, which leads to a pedal that feels a little bit more alive. So you will have a pedal that sticks under your foot like a tight setting, but you will get more feedback from the pedal and you will be able to play with the pedal and not against the pedal. Well, a heavier beta, a heavier spring setting, and so on and so forth, will lead to a setup where you will more or less need to force the pedal to play for you with the same reaction, with the same responsibility. So these are the two more extreme groups I have to deal with when I get to pedal recommendations, setup recommendations, and overall feedback. So, but I think also most betas available on the market right now, most of them also have now some type of weight increasements built in, but they are all in a certain range. Standard betas from Per, Apex, Tama, and so on and so forth are all between 70 and 90 grams, which is a super good average, and you can compensate by just how far you have it out of the pedal. CK betas, the standard betas, are more on the extreme side, as well as Axis Sonic hammers, which both are about, I think, 120 to 130 grams, which is super, super heavy. But besides that, usually the average of beta weights is between 70 and 90 grams. Also with the beta I have available, it's depending on the setup and the weight, between 70 and I think 96 grams, which gives you, if you experiment with the weight of the beta, with the static weight and the distance of beta and center of rotation, gives you lots of room to find your preferred setup. just by experimenting with it. There are no shortcuts. You need to go through certain types of settings, one after another, take your conclusions, and go on with the next setup.
Yeah, I think what kind of what worked for me, because I also like a light beater, not a heavy one, but what really helped me was actually, yeah, to because I would always try to, you know, position the beater so that it, and I have a 22-inch kick, I would always position so it hits the center of the drum head. But then I saw guys playing, you know, having the beaters further out, right? So they would hit the bass drum a bit more up from the center. But once I tried this, it kind of also blew my mind, because it's such a small thing you do, because you need to extend just a bit to get you to feel the difference. And there's yeah, and it's so much more control. It actually became much easier, and it also feels kind of natural in a way. But this is also very personal, so I don't know what feels natural for other people. But yeah, I think that extending the beaters further up is a really good way to find control in a pedal.
That's the thing. I mean, if you, it's in I'm assuming it's easier to get control over your pedal by having a increased distance. Back in the days, I shared the rehearsal room with another drummer who has the very first generation of eliminators back then, single chains with the stock beaters, and he had them, I don't know, about here, I think. So really, really far in, and also a rather tight spring tension as a static setup. And when I tried to play it, it was so springy. So the moment I stepped onto the pedal, I was always flying off my chair again because it was so springy. This was the feeling he preferred, and he was so fast, so powerful with that. And he also played with, yeah, he played with a certain power, and he was relying on this springy feeling and this super weird short beater distance, and he was able to achieve way more speed, way more accuracy, and way more power out of his kick drum than I was able back then. And it was so interesting to see. It's just, for me, it was, I cannot play with that stuff. But the same thing is, if I try to step on Martin's pedal, I'm not able to play just for a minute 16ths at 100 beats. That's not possible for me. But
yeah,
that's coming down to just experimenting and yeah, figure out what's right for you, because there is no generic right or wrong.
Yeah, I had a question, one about beater weights. Why would somebody put on a weight, like, let's say, you know, because I always thought that people, you know, once you have a weight, you put it here underneath the beater. But then I saw people do, you know, putting it here or here somewhere. What's the difference, and why would you do such a thing? Why would you place it in different places?
It comes back to the same theory of how far your beater is actually out of the pedal, because if you're just looking for a slightly heavier beater, you can accomplish that by adding a beater weight and just moving it here, for example, because that will just add a tiny little bit of dynamic weight. And when you actually play the beater, static wise, it's the same. And if you go further towards the head of the beater, the more, or this static weight increases in its dynamic weight. So if you have the same weight, for example, a 10-gram weight here, back here where my memory clamp is, it wouldn't have much, if any, influence at all. But if you put it here, you will notice a huge difference in terms of playing. Probably you're not able to play the pedal at all as you're used to it. So it's basically just a way of accurately and dynamically get the beater weight right to actually the point where you prefer it, just by moving the beater weight up and down if you want to rely on such a thing and if you need that. I think, yeah, that's the main theory behind that. Makes it any sense? I don't know.
Totally. All right. So we talked about springs, we talked about beaters, we talked about the footboard. Now, this is one that's really interesting for me at this time, and that's the drive. Because, yeah, I'm not really a direct drive guy. I don't know. I think I would kind of get used to it. I could, but well, you know, since all my life I've played only chain drives, but now I'm really thinking about a belt drive, like really thinking about a belt. Yeah, but yeah, what's different in the feel having about all these three different drive shafts drives?
That's a whole can of worms. If you just compare, make it easy, compare a strap drive and a chain drive, I don't think there's much different at all. As far as my research goes, everything started with these leather straps back in the very early days, and they had a tendency to break. It's organic material, so they started to use single chains because that was available as hardware specific stuff. And that was the only way to drive a pedal back then, if you have the only exception of, for example, a Speed King from Ludwig, or some other direct drive combinations. But I don't think there's much of a difference between a strap and the chain, besides the actual weight, because a chain is naturally heavier than a strap, which also has an influence on the motion. And the second difference probably is the motion, because a chain obviously can only pivot within their joints, while a strap is flexible all the way and anywhere. So the reason why I have chosen these straps on the Darwin is because, in my opinion, it's a very personal opinion, there's no need for a chain drive in these days, because straps are so well developed, these materials, they are so durable. You can, I don't know, this one probably will last for, if you put a few hundred kilos on them, it will still hold up perfectly fine. So these materials have developed so great that I take every difference between a chain and a strap as an advantage, having the strap having over a chain set up. So that's basically my 2 cents, my conclusion out of that. Because if you just look at what I did in the early days, when I looked through different pedals and there's wait, there's a chain pedal available and a strap pedal available, I saw the strap was always a little bit thicker compared to what I'm using now, for example. But I had also always the assumption that the strap will somehow, I don't know, lead to a spongy feeling, that it will, I don't know, like a rubber band, have some let go and some bounciness in it, while the chain will be solid. And that's certainly not the case, because both behave very similar. I have experienced that the strap setup will let you use a softer setup. So you can decrease spring tension a little bit and have a lighter beta, while still being as efficient as having a similar chain setup. Because the chain, how it rolls, it's weight in motion, so it adds the 2 cents to the whole feeling. So just having a chain, especially if the pedal's bouncing, you have this clunk sound when the pedal is just moving independently from the beater, while both just work by pulling it down. So there's no, where there's on the way back up, both will compensate and don't do much to the whole movement. So as I said, to break it down, I think both are very much the same. And the strap just gives you some more advantages in terms of weight and flexibility, which leads to, in my eyes, more efficiency. Especially if you're not relying on a round cam. If you have a more eccentric cam, the strap definitely will show its advantage just by being able to being flexible and tilt all the way wherever it's possible. Both have also, in terms of lateral stability, a double chain, which is also, I think, the marketing phrase that it leads to more stability. What it does, it just slightly compensates a weak heel hinge design, because in order to have the pedal working straight and not having any wiggle, it's not the responsible of a double chain to do that, because it still has super large possibilities of sideways motion. The job of keeping a footboard straight is here, and probably that's just a try to work a way around of not having as tight the hinge as tight as it should be, for example. I don't think that the difference between a single and a double chain leads to more stability. It just increases the weight. In terms of
it just so happens that, you know, I think not most, all like single chain pedals are the cheap chain pedals that have a wobbly, you know, heel plate.
The thing is, compare the actual parts between an entry-level pedal from the larger brands and the more advanced models. So I don't want any names or blame anyone, but you see, if you just look at the specific parts, there is usually not much difference. There's one little ball bearing here more, one here, and also there's not a single chain but a double chain. So basically what I assume, just based on my experience, the cost of developing and manufacturing these different pedals is more or less pretty close together, but having huge differences like a ball bearing at a certain pivot point, or the difference between a single and double chain, will give you some room to advise and promote the product that it's far superior one over the other, just by having this super durable double chain, and this will lead to this and this and this, which is all assumptions based on you can trust and believe them or not. That's my 2 cents out of them. But I don't want to say it, but I think it's more a marketing gimmick than it's worth considering the overall influence of the entire pedal.
Yeah. So,
take it or leave it.
Yeah. All right, and the direct drives.
Yeah, the difference between a chain or strap drive and a direct drive is then if you have, starting with a round cam, all round cam on a chain or on a strap pedal, you will have a linear feeling from top to bottom through the whole motion. If it gets eccentric in one way or another, you will have an eccentric or an exponential increase of friction, of feedback, just by how the pedal gets. So the curve goes either linear or it's a curve up. That's the only 2 options you have on a strap or chain pedal. On direct drive pedal, it really depends on where the direct drive angle starts. So if this is the top connection and this is the footboard connection, it's a huge difference if this leverage point of the direct drive, this is the cam, this is the link, starts here or starts here or starts here. Because if you, for example, take bottom line axis pedal, it has the cam facing this way, more or less. So during the movement, interestingly, the pedal starts rather lightweight feeling. No, wait. No, it starts heavy, will towards the middle, will decrease its feedback, so it will become more lightweight, just taking the motion in consideration without the spring working against it. And by going back down over this point, the pedal will gain in feedback again, in friction again. So basically you have somewhat like this in the curve, or depending on the setting, also like this. So it's not linear, and depending on the setting, for example, if you don't overcome this point, I'm sorry, if you don't overcome this point, the pedal will just be heavy at the beginning and will start becoming less heavy during the motion. So if you have tried a very generic setup axis pedal or Pearl Demon drive, any other direct drive pedal with a direct drive setup, which has an angle like this and just behaves between this and this point, some people, me included, will have the problem that the pedal feels like it wants to run away from me. So if I press into the pedal reacts faster than I want to, because I don't get the feedback from the pedal I'm looking. Especially, interestingly, the deeper I press into the pedal, the more the pedal wants to run away from me. And that's the interesting point with direct drive in terms of the actual motion, just the basic motion. So you don't have a linear motion whatsoever, but what has a huge influence on the entire setting is the leverage. Basically, the leverage between, just think about the strap now being a direct drive link, the leverage between this point, so actually if the strap's here, here, or here, so this point, and this point here. So basically, if the direct drive link sits like this, or sits like this, or sits like this, because the more radical the angle is, on the axis pedals, you have this VDL adjustment, which lets you just move the top lever more away from the pedal. This leads to a more lightweight feeling pedal, but also it is necessary. It's always about the relationship between the beta angle and the footboard angle. Having an extreme angle like this will lead to a lightweight pedal, but in order to accomplish this lightweight feeling, also a larger footboard motion is necessary to gain the same beta movement, while having the leverage all the way in the VDL, which is, for example, a setup Martin would prefer by having the super efficient tiny motion feeling. The pedal will become heavier and also more difficult to control, but just a tiny footboard motion is necessary to let the beta swing over a large radius. So these two angles have so much more influence than the actual feeling. So there is a basic direct drive feeling. You either love it or hate it. I don't have found anyone who says, yeah, it's okay. Just by experimenting with these leverages, for example, on the Darwin, I experimented a lot with that, obviously, but there's quite lots of room to increase and adjust the top leverage and the bottom leverage. You can almost go from a more or less heavy chain-like feeling pedal to a super quick, highly responsive axis, super speedy setup pedal, just by playing around these leverages. Not touching the beta angle, not touching the spring tension, nothing. You will get the feeling just by having a more conservative angle, switching between a conservative angle and the extreme angle, you will get the intention that the spring tension has changed dramatically, while just the leverages have changed. That's so interesting. So it's probably a similar conclusion to having a shorter or a longer footboard. It's the leverages also shifting gears on the bicycle in some point. So that's in regards of direct drive, that's super interestingly, because you can do more extreme things. I don't know if it makes sense to have these options. Probably for people who prefer that, it makes sense, but you can go from one extreme to another. What I have also experienced is that comparing a generic strap drive or chain drive with a generic direct drive setting, you will lose some power just by having the direct drive, not because of some friction, board bearings, whatsoever. That hasn't any influence at all, just by how the pedal reacts and how the general motion and behavior of the pedal is. This will lead to a less efficient pedal in terms of how much power you get into the drum head. In times of trigger and modern mixing, mastering, that doesn't make much sense to mention that, but for other types of music, that has a huge influence. So that's probably the direct drive setting and its possibilities packed together very tiny. I mean, that's similar to footboards. You could probably write a book with all the things that matter in these things, but it's first it's hard to describe, and it's even harder to describe over the internet. If you, I like at drum players and stuff, and when I have some pedal set up, I just like to have paper play my pedal at one direct drive setting and just move the leverage back and forward. People say, whoa, that's a completely different pedal. And adjusted one single parameter a tiny little bit. That's super interesting. But breaking down the easiest way is if you have the possibility to try any type of direct drive pedal, try it. If you feel comfortable with it, go for it. If not, you will have a hard time getting the feeling out of this pedal you're looking for, bottom line. So
that's an interesting thought, that yeah, that if you don't like it at first try, then maybe it's not for you. I guess
yeah, I mean,
that's what you mean.
Like, yeah, it's not like you don't like it at all, but if you try it, you say, okay, that's something that's interesting. I might look for exactly this feeling. This is not exactly the setup I'm looking for, but it feels okay to me. I can work with that. I can increase and play with this kind of setup. Or you can say, you step on it and say, oh no, that's super weird,
Yeah.
And then you won't get the feeling you're looking for by adjusting any parameters.
Yeah, I remember trying the Darwins in both configurations, and yeah, I think maybe like if you're starting out, like if you're a new guy, then maybe you don't know what's natural and what's not, because everything's alien, right? Then maybe yeah, but I would still start with a belt or chain drive. But I think,
my opinion is go for what you prefer in that case, because if you have chosen at a very early stage a certain type of pedal, you will develop and build your technique on the pedal you're used to. So you will grow with the pedal. So I think it doesn't have much influence at all.
Yeah, but yeah, I remember I tried my first direct drive pedal maybe like 5 years into drumming, and yeah, and I could instantly say like, this feels alien to me, I don't want that, you know. So maybe I fall into the category of people who are not meant to play direct drives, maybe.
That's especially also speaking just for me personally, I can also not go along with the direct drive. For me, it feels alien, as I said. I really prefer the Darwin at its most natural setting, because just to me personally, that's the way it feels right. But then talking to so many other people, getting all their feedback and all their setup recommendations, I thought, whoa, there's so many things that all work out. That's so weird and so cool.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Darwins a bit. How's it different from the other pedals on the market?
I tried, because that's basically what I'm doing is I'm in a price range, and quality wise I'm probably at the top level, because that's the only way I'm able to do these things, making everything just nearby, close together in less small quantities, so on and so forth, because I really enjoy, I don't know, I didn't want to go big with that. I really enjoy this one-on-one conversations and getting the feedback from customers, know where my pedals are and who's playing them. I don't know, it just feels right to me. So this was very one big conclusion I had from the very beginning. So if I do it, I do what's possible, no compromises. I know that it will lead to a very high price point, but people are able to choose, go for it or leave it. So this was what kept me thinking for a while before I even started thinking about publicly marketing and selling my products. But basically what I try to do, and still trying, is to make a pedal which is as versatile as possible. So my goal is to have a pedal that feels right to everyone in a basic setup, where they can just play the pedal, where they can just play the pedal and feel, okay, yeah, that feels okay, that feels all right. But if they want to dive into different setups a little bit deeper, they also should be able to do so. So I try to have a basic setup that feels right, but also have so many options in terms of how you can adjust strap drive and direct drive settings that you can completely turn over the feeling of your pedal if you want to spend that much time with your gear and just experimenting with it. And besides that, the idea was to have a double pedal or a middle pedal that can be separated into two individual single pedals just by removing the joints and driveshaft, but also having the possibility of having a left-hand pedal and a right-hand pedal. So just to be able to offer an option for anyone out there, because for me, being a left-handed person and former drummer or still drummer, I don't know, it was always, I don't know, a little bit on the not on the main floor with looking for pedals. It was all pedals are available for right-handed players, and then you can choose between 5 as a left-handed, and that didn't feel right to me. So I tried to just offer as many options for anyone as possible. Besides that, I think, yeah, what I tried to do is just getting all the knowledge and experience I gained through my job as a mechanical engineer. I used to work on high quality, super clean, accurate parts for the semiconductor industry. We developed some upgrades for bigger brands and, yeah, companies working with these brands in the industry. So basically, it's a similar starting point for where I'm now with my pedals and my upgrades. Yeah, basically it is still just a drum pedal that lets you play your kick drum. It's not a magical unicorn, but it's, in my opinion, it's pretty nice to look at, and it will offer you plenty of opportunities if you want to dive into that. But yeah, it's back to the beginning. Don't assume that buying one high quality pedal will let you cut corners. No matter if it's an Axis, Trick, mine, Polish pedals, whatsoever, you will get from all of those pedals, including mine, a very, very nice developed and good looking, properly good working pedal over a long time, which is reliable. Basically, what I consider myself as an advantage over other brands is that I like to flip sides from time to time and just try to look at my stuff and what I'm doing from a customer's perspective, especially if people reach out to me for feedback, for questions, problems, issues. I always ask myself, okay, what is the thing I would expect in return if I would reach out to a brand asking for some things, for some advice, for some help? And this is where I think I take responsibility, and also my customers will say more or less the same, that I really try to get the support every customer deserves. So once in a while, I always have people reaching out to me asking for some endorsements or whatever. And basically what I'm able to do is I'm just able to do manufacturing these pedals in small quantities for a high price. And also considering the demand now, I'm also just able to fulfill a certain demand. So to everyone, doesn't matter if it's some guy who's reaching out for endorsement or a regular customer. I try to treat everyone the same, because I cannot do some magic. I'm not able to buy some people in to promote people or to promote my product by giving it out to anyone. So I think everyone who's looking for a pedal in this price range deserves to be treated as a professional artist, even if they are not. And if they are professional artists, they deserve to be treated the same way. So that's probably one thing that I have experienced based on feedback, which yeah, takes me or leaves me apart from other brands. Just what I don't want, as said, to blame anyone or just point with the finger of you did something stupid. That's not what I want to treat, but I just, within what I'm able to control, I try to get to a point where everyone has a good time, has a good feeling, and yeah, that's it. So basically, I try to offer a solution for everyone with having the versatile pedal and the support. If it's the case, it's cool. If not, it's what it is. So
yeah, and and aesthetically, the Darwin is the best looking pedal in the world, in my opinion.
Right, it developed honestly over time. So I always, when I built the second prototype, I thought, okay, yes, that's it, that's cool, that's how I want to do it. And I think within the last years, if you want to count versions, I think there are 20 to 25 different versions with just minor adjustments and improvements that have developed over time. But I also tried to keep everything as modular and backwards compatible as possible. So I have some customers who have a very, very early generation, very first gen Darwin Pedal, and they are doing fine. But then they come to a point where, for example, they want to change the springs more frequently and experiment with them. And back then I just had a hole here where you had to completely get the spring in and out. It was a mess to just swap out springs. And now these pedals have these spring hooks where you can basically just grab it and just remove the spring and put it back in if you want. And then I'm able to say, okay, if you're looking for something like that, I can just send you these parts over, swap these parts out, and you're good to go again. There's no need to buy the latest generation of my work if you're just looking for this minor improvement. There's always the possibility to do so. Also, when I'm experimenting with different cams, now I have a larger round cam and a smaller round cam, an extreme direct drive cam, so on and so forth, and everything works. Almost everything works with any generations I have ever made of pedals, because I don't want to get, probably that's a very, very personal thing again, but I don't want to get people into the mood and feeling that they have some piece of outdated gear and not being on the latest standards anymore, because I'm assuming that if you buy high quality gear like this, you want to have it, to be able to use it the way it deserves to be for a decade or even more, just for a longer time. So if you are able and willing to spend the money, usually you also want to get a certain outcome of this purchase. That's how I see it. So I try to have everything backwards compatible, and even now having all these versions of the pedal, because I just took the experience and feedback I got from customers and try to get it into later versions of the pedal. So now for the last, I think, 2 to 3 years, I think not much has changed besides the additional parts. But just by getting this feedback, I was able to develop the pedal as it is now. That's
cool.
So it's a relationship. I'm probably customers rely on me by building the pedal, but I also rely on customers offering me feedback to a certain point, because I learned from that on the way as well. So
have you counted which version of the pedal are you now on?
As I said, there's so many tiny changes, but especially within the very first, the first patch of pedals was, I think, 5 pedals. Then I made 10 pedals. Then I made 5 again years ago. But I think within the first few sets, there were some issues I stepped over that led to, hey, it would be easier to machine this part in this way, or it would be easier to assemble the pedal if I do it this way. So there were lots of tiny changes that helped me to set up the pedal easier, and lots of other minor little changes on the very first stage. And then later on, I think there were only just 2 or 3 changes worth mentioning. But in total, from the very first prototype, I thought that's it until now. Yeah, we were at 30 different pedals, or different versions of pedals probably, but always with minor increased changes.
Cool. All right, and you also have some pedal upgrades for most pedal brands and models, right?
Yes.
How'd you start that? Did you just fiddle with all the pedals and thought I can do this better?
Yeah. I think one thing has led to another. So that goes back to people reaching out to me asking for help with broken footboards and driveshafts, where I really thought about, hey, the pedal in general is fine, and the people like how the pedal feels. There are just certain parts that are not well made and have a tendency to wear down and break over time. And these people used to throw away the pedal to buy a new one, just to have the same issue a year later again. And I don't know, it's not environmentally friendly in any way, just throwing stuff away you have just purchased when there's just a tiny thing wrong with it. So I thought, okay, everything's more or less modular, and there are some areas that are more or less universal on a larger variety of pedals. For example, the Driveshafts. Most common pedals use an 8mm half moon shaped connections as the Driveshaft connection. So if the pedal feels right and everything's fine, just replacing the Driveshaft with a construction that will last considerably forever will lead to people not feeling the necessity to throw their pedal away and buy some new stuff. Just replace the stuff that doesn't feel right and go on again. So that was the basic idea, especially with the Driveshaft, for example. I used to do way more different and individual upgrades for certain pedals, but honestly spoken, due to the demand of the Darwins and some other upgrades, and that I not want to outsource and go big, whatever, I had to stop offering the variety of upgrades. I mean, there was only 1 or 2 purchases a month, half a year, whatever. So there was not that demand, but I still wanted to offer these things. Now I'm not able to do that anymore, to be honest. Yeah. But I try to keep the upgrades, and I will keep the upgrades that make sense and in a technical way. So especially parts that have a tendency to break and wear down on certain pedals, I will continue to offer. So for example, the Driveshaft is I think my top selling product when it comes to upgrades, because it's a rather inexpensive way to really get the feeling of your Tama Ivan Cobra Pearl Eliminator whatsoever to a point where it feels absolutely symmetrical. The problem is that these brands, especially if you think larger, they need to take certain expenses into consideration. And even if they would be able to offer a solution that works way better than the solution they're currently offering, they cannot afford to do that and offer that at a certain price point. There's no shortcuts, it is as it is. And the usual Driveshaft joints, these tiny little joints most brands use, they are usually meant to rotate in one direction and just compensate a crooked angle at a certain part of a machine. And they are made to rotate consistently at a certain speed for years, and that's it. They are not meant to handle and compensate this back and forward motion a drum pedal has all the time. So they develop, play, and wear down quite quickly. Sometimes out of the box, they have a play in them because they are not meant and not built to completely free of any play. They are meant to rotate and compensate these angles. That's it. So basically, what I've done with the Driveshaft is I've made some machine parts, put in some ball bearings, experimented with some distances, and with some rare parts, in order to get a joint that is completely free of any play and still super smooth and stays that way. That's the important thing over years, because if you just pop in ball bearings there and say that's the thing, if it's not done right, the Driveshaft will still develop a tiny play, even just a little click you will hear. And if you increase accuracy, you will also feel this. So this is what I've done with the Driveshaft. And basically there are different versions of this Driveshaft. Most have this universal connection. Basically, this Driveshaft is meant to fit to any pedal available out there. And also, if you decide to upgrade from a Pearl Eliminator to a Demon Drive, you should be able to just grab this Driveshaft from your old pedal, mount it on a new pedal, and you're good to go again. So this should stay with you forever, and for how long you want to keep your pedals and your system. Considering the price point of entry-level pedal, this is probably at the same price, but it's still cheaper than throwing away an Iron Cobra and buying a new Iron Cobra just to end at a very same problem a year later. So that's the conclusion again. I'm able to offer a product at a certain price point that will definitely help you if you're looking for help, or if you're looking for a certain feeling. As I said, people got used to this, the lag in the Driveshaft, and cannot get along with this, so that's okay. But in my opinion, especially with the Driveshaft, if you're looking for one way to upgrade your pedal, this is definitely the way to go, and this will do the most difference. So it's basically. I mean, you can completely, if you upgrade your pedal with a Driveshaft and some longboards, it's still, if you buy a pedal, Driveshafts, longboards, I think it's still 600, 700 euros. But if you already own a pedal, and if you just look for minor upgrades one or another and just try to improve it as it is, purchasing one upgrade after another is still way more efficient and way more environmentally friendly, and probably easier to then throw away a complete pedal and then purchase another one. Whatever.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool way to think about it. Yeah, but yeah, that was you've answered all my questions and I have none left. Mind blown. All right, so yeah, I don't want to keep you any longer, and we've been talking for 1.5 hours, so yeah, yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and yeah, thanks a lot, Dennis, and yeah, I hope this is this has been, you know, of help to somebody, and maybe answered some questions.
It's also helping me to just rewind all the things and just talk about these things, because it freshes up my mind as well. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity, and also hope that I have probably either made everything way more complicated than it is, or brought some light in the dark. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you for that. All right.
Thank you very much. And see you later.